I want to talk a little bit now about post-production. And post-production can be very important for certain things in scenes, and especially when creating a mood or specific lighting and things like that that maybe you can't achieve while you're working on your actual scene. Um, don't be discouraged to use post-production. A lot of people think of it as cheating. I think it's an extremely important part of 3D imagery is being able to manipulate your images afterwards. Although it can be a lot more difficult when you're working on animations, but Vue has some features for post-production that can be rather helpful when creating certain scenes. I have a little scene here I just created, just a few rocks and a little bit of an ecosystem just to show some plants on these rocks. Um, just built kind of a little thing here, added some water, and selected one of the skies. Now, one of the things is sometimes you select a sky that you like, and you really like the lighting, but maybe the color isn't exactly what you planned. Maybe the mood isn't quite right. So one thing we can do is go into our post-production um, options, and one way of doing that is just to double-click on the camera that you're working on, and that'll bring up your advanced camera options, which has a post-processing uh, little tabs here. Or you could also double-click on that camera in the scene, or you could also right-mouse click on your camera and go to Edit Object, which I'll pretty much bring up the exact same thing. You get a preview right away of your scene, which is nice because then any of the post-processing you do doesn't have to be re-rendered. It will just edit our existing image, which is the beauty of post-production. One major thing that I really like using is the color filtering. So let's go ahead and check that on. And as you can see, just with this brown color, we've changed the mood entirely of the scene. And the mood is very important, whether you want it a nice warm color or sort of a cool color. It can change different aspects and add more emotion to your scene. So if we go around here and just play around with different colors. Now, subtlety is a definite must when it comes to this. You don't want to be using very rich colors because it can create too much of an effect. If we go ahead and bring that to a real dark red, obviously that's going to create um, and take away a little bit too much from the scene. But if you have a sky where you have the light exactly how you want it, but the color just isn't right, this is a good way to sort of change the mood just a tiny bit. And what we can do is just we'll bring it down a little bit on the right side here on our color, and we can kind of go through all the different colors. And this is all real time, which is one really nice thing is you can just kind of move the chooser around here, and we can see the color changing within our post-production window. And we can set this to more of a yellow if we wanted, or something a little bit warmer. We could add more of an orange in there. And we could also go ahead and make it more blue if we wanted, and that changes the mood entirely. And just different colors will just give you different emotions for your scene. And you don't be discouraged to use these effects. It's not cheating. It's something that's built in. It's meant for this, and post-production I think is extremely important. Even a lot of the scenes I've created, I've gone into even Photoshop and maybe added things that were either difficult to do in Vue or not possible to do in Vue. And it doesn't mean that you're cheating. It just means you have more options to you. In this day and age with all the technology, it's good to have more tools at hand, especially when you're doing post, which is everybody uses post, so don't be discouraged. There's also other things you can do in here, and that is the gamma correction, which is important. Because if you're not getting the correct contrast that you might want in the scene, you can use gamma correction to sort of change that contrast without actually having to go into the scene and change the lighting that you have. So you can go in there and make subtle changes to your lighting. I'll kind of bring it in right here. And then contrast with the gamma. And now we have a much richer scene. The colors are brought out a lot more. And that's one nice thing about 3D is you get the ability to create more, I guess, unrealistic looking things. Because if you were to take this picture with the camera, it obviously wouldn't look that crisp, and people call it computer colors, where they're much brighter and things like that. But in my opinion, a lot of the time it looks much better, and that's the whole point of 3D, is to create something that doesn't exist and not just entirely mimic real world things. Even though Vue is extremely good at that, and if that's what you want to do, mimic the real world, then you can. But this also gives you the ability to go in and create something that isn't real and that you might like to see, um, without having to actually go out and take a picture and manipulate it. And you have the ability to just create these things and exaggerate them, which is just a wonderful thing about these advanced camera options. So you can really play around with that and get some exaggerated effects with it. There's lots of different things we could change with the color perspective. We could also change sort of the contrast of our image. As we see, we're moving around here and we get some different types of colors in there. And sometimes it might not be what you're looking for. Sometimes it is. It is a bit dramatic at this point. But adjusting the gamma will kind of bring us back. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK and do just a quick render of this so we can see the difference between the post-processing and just the regular scene that we had created. Yeah, we can see the final render with much darker tones, different lighting, somewhat more realistic, in my opinion, really depending on the kind of look you're going for. But this was a very simple, easy way to fix what we already had without actually having to go in and edit light options and edit position of the sun and things like that, and edit the textures, because let's say we wanted this dark shadows in here and things like that. We'd have to actually go in and make the contrast of our actual materials maybe a little bit darker, or even go in and make some light setting changes. And this is just a much quicker way, and sometimes you end up with a much better render when you're doing things like this. The front cover of this tutorial with the swamp scene is actually done with a lot of post-production afterwards, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're cheating. It just means you're using Vue as a basis to create your initial image, and then you can go in and change things afterwards and add to it without having to re-render or make large changes in your scene. Because if you have the correct lighting that you want and you just want to change things subtly, you won't have to re-render. You can just use these post-production effects, and by using them in Vue, it's much better for animation, unless you have a good program, maybe like Combustion or something, that's good for post-production afterwards for animation, or something a little more higher end. This is a good way to do it actually within Vue. So we can actually see our original render here, and compared to the other one, it's much different. And now we have it updating for the more of that darker look.